Yeah, cool. So Adam Caines. So I'm one of the co-founders of Upplft, which is a talent tech platform. So we help businesses connect and meet and match with candidates, trying to look at new things like personality, values, and culture, and different ways of matching candidates to businesses, with the idea being that can create longer lasting relationships, working relationships, and well-being in the workforce where you're more aligned to the actual business that you want to work for. Background-wise, been in Australia for about 10 years, worked across a few different industries since I've been here. My background in the UK was like big consulting, working on big IT programs. I worked on like the biggest IT program in the world at one point, which was like a £1 billion project for DWP, which is the equivalent of Department for Social Services here, which is like a massive overhaul. It's a chaotic failure. As you can imagine. And then came over here, didn't have a job, didn't know anybody in 2014, and stumbled into an agency working in media, which was fun, working with all of those 7 West Medias and 9 MSN and everyone at the time. And then kind of stumbled into fintech and worked in fintech for sort of the last 8 or so years in startups. And then also more recently until February this year, I was working at EY, helping them drive that fintech and payments tech consulting practice, which seems completely different to talent tech, obviously. But, I'm the kind of product and technology person. So my co-founders for Upplft are both from the recruitment space, and we can bundle together and come up with the idea, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Sounds like you're stumbling upwards.
Yeah,
A lot of people manage to fall down, but you're stumbling up the stairs. This is conscious decisions or some luck involved?
Yeah, some conscious decisions, some not decisions in my power, particularly in the startup space. Like, not everything always goes well, and sometimes, you have to move on, or, you get moved on because they fail. But yeah, I think I actually had a chat with one of my mentors yesterday. I was chatting to her, and she was saying, I think I've got a problem where I can't stay in businesses for more than a couple of years. And I was like, I think I've got that same problem, where I kind of seem to move around a little bit. But I think I found a good space now where working on something that I'm passionate about, building something from the beginning, but then also I'm quite heavily involved in the kind of startup community and mentoring and being on advisory boards, and which gives me the variety, I think, and the depth I quite like in comparison to consulting, where I think you feel like you have that variety, but you don't have any autonomy over your time.
It's interesting you mentioned that kind of, not just you, but lots of people have a desire to kind of move on from a business for one reason or another. And often the tools you need to get from 0 to 60 are not the tools you need to get from 60 to 100. And the kind of this, I think before the show a few weeks ago, we talked about the kind of startup ecosystem, Canva. Most founders, when they go looking for money, they talk about being the next Canva, but there's a lot to be said about companies aiming for the kind of $50 to $100 million exits. I don't want to say that Canva's ruined the startup scene. I think I've heard this phrase before, but what's your kind of thoughts on the sycophantic needs of founders to say they're going to be the next super billion-dollar business?
Yeah. I think when we spoke, we were talking about the impact of like the Canvas and Atlassians and the Go Ones and those unicorns on the startup ecosystem. And I think it's great. Like from one hand, it's brought great visibility to the Australian ecosystem globally. So it means there's more investment coming in from overseas, and people are more interested in deploying capital here, which is great. The VC and investment ecosystem here is not that mature, right? It's only sort of 10 years or so old, and there's probably like 200 people that work in it. It's not like a massive industry, but there's, that's where all the capital is, or most of the capital. And yeah, from one hand, Canva and those companies are great, but I think having thought a bit more about when we're talking about it, they're more like category curators. If you think about Canva, in that design asset space, perfectly timed with the rise of gig and hustle culture, that's right. So really right time, right place as well. And same with like Atlassian, right at the time when sort of everyone was moving from waterfall to agile, they had the tool that could help you do that. So, right time, right place as well. So, and they're kind of creating these new categories and new markets that didn't exist. And I don't think that happens very often. You think like Uber, like rideshare is a whole new industry that didn't exist before the taxi industry. So not everyone can do that. And I've definitely seen, as I'm sure you have, like in pitch decks, we're the Canva of, or this and that, whatever it may be. And it's a great aim, but, as VCs are set up to have like a 2-6-2 rule, or whatever the numbers might be, where they're expecting, 2 out of 2 companies to do really well, and like 6 companies to perform moderately, and then 2 to fail. I think it's probably maybe more on the failure side than moderate, but
2-6-2 rule.
2-6-2 rule, yeah.
Like
There's other numbers are quoted as well. I think there's a 10-something rule as well, but that's one that I've seen. Which means that they do need those moderate return businesses as well. And there's some really excellent companies that have had great exits in that, 25, 50, 100, 250 million that you don't really hear about that much in the ecosystem, and because they're not the unicorns, and maybe the founders don't want the kind of fame that comes along with it as well, and want to be more, quiet achievers. And people forget Mel at Canva got 100 no's before she got investment. I wonder how many of those 100 people have invested in it since, and now go out there and say they've invested in Canva.
True. You mentioned mentorship as well. How many mentors do you have?
Ones that know that they're mentors, and ones that don't know that they're mentors.
Oh yeah, it's always good to have the Kato Unagi kind of mentor there, because I think mentorship's something I've looked more kind of closely at lately. You heard of Viz Ambre?
I haven't, no.
Viz Ambre said, they kind of explained that you should stop taking advice from super successful people. So let's say someone's looking to Mel from Canva as a mentor. Like, if you can, great. But there's kind of a trend of people that have already made it, that have a tendency to explain how work-life balance is the most important thing, and how you can't be powered by resentment or insufficiency or hatred. And I almost think that's a failure on the part of the gurus and the mentors giving this advice, because, as I said earlier, the tools you need to get from 0 to 60 are very different for the tools you need to get from 95 to 100. And I think if you are able to kind of channel something in those early startup days, if you're 10 steps ahead, it's hard to remember what it was like to be a step 1 or a step 0. And even though you might have a roadmap, you might have left crumbs along the way to give you prompts and cues and ideas that you can pass on to other people, you can't remember the texture of your mind that you was going through back then. So I'm wondering, when you're kind of choosing a mentor, whether they know they're a mentor or not, if you're kind of thinking, they're where I want to be, or they're a few steps ahead and I'd like to get their take on what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think, echo your point, but I think a lot of people, when they're super successful, forget about the then and now, and, they'll tell you what it's like to do what they do now and what their routine is like and that kind of stuff, which is probably super unachievable when you're in the grind and in the real depth of trying to build a business, versus when you've made that success story and you're in that space where you maybe have more time and space because there's now 1,000 people working for your company that can do those 1,000 things you're doing before. So maybe take that with a pinch of salt to some extent. But there's obviously lessons to learn from people that have built significant businesses as well. I think I kind of look at mentorship in a few different ways. There's ones that I think are more peers. I think I'm a big believer that you can learn a lot from people that are in the same space as you at the same time, because they'll be experiencing the same pain, but they'll have a different perspective. It's kind of like the same way I look at parenting. I just consume as many opinions as possible and then just find the one that works for me. And I kind of look at, getting advice and support from people in the ecosystem in the same way. Like, everyone will tell you 100 ways to do something, but you've got to work out what works for you.
How do you kind of choose that advice diet? Because
it can be noisy.
I've had it before, right? Where you're kind of taking all these ideas and you become an aggregation device for good ideas. But then I start to kind of have the echoes of this might be good, this might be bad. And some of the things I'm kind of utilizing to build something, there's often parts of that where the people that have done it are now castigating the skill set or traits I need to actually make that happen. Like if I'm being told to go and get my 45 minutes of sunshine walk each morning and optimize coffee and salt intake, it's 10 o'clock and I haven't done a thing, right? And sometimes you need to just start doing the thing to achieve the thing you want. How do you go about kind of narrowing down that advice diet?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging because, you go onto TikTok or whatever platform it may be, and somebody's having an ice bath at 4:30 in the morning, and then they're having some form of coffee that I've never heard of, or some green powder, and then they're in the gym at 5 and they're there for an hour and a half, and then they get back and they have, breakfast that I don't have time to make, and then they do their gratitude text messages or write in their journal, and by that time, like, I'm not even awake. I mean, also, these people definitely don't have kids, that's for sure. And yeah, it's definitely challenging. I think you try to, or at least I try to listen as much as I can, read as much as I can, maybe skim more than let the depth, and then just trying to find the thing that resonates with you and try it and see if it works. Also, from like an echo perspective, if there's enough of a voice that's saying the same thing, then it's probably worth at least pursuing or thinking about. I'm not going to buy an ice bath anytime soon, but nonetheless, that's just because that's not my thing. But maybe there's some value in understanding why it might be useful, right? That's like, how can things be useful to me that can continue to build my toolkit, and recognizing where your weaknesses may be as well, and kind of double down on those things to make sure that you at least have some capability in your toolkit that you can use.
You mentioned being part of kind of the biggest project before. What's more stressful, being part of that and maybe not having the autonomy, or building your own thing now? Where do you find the biggest pain point has been?
I think about like stress, if I kind of categorize it in that way. Like, I personally find things more stressful when I'm not in control, or at least don't have or not empowered to provide value and input, I guess. So working on like a £1 billion IT program where you're kind of just part of the monkey grind is quite stressful, versus where, you're in charge of, or at least you're trying to build something and you have the ability to like make a change or pivot or iterate or make a different decision, like on a minute by minute basis, in comparison to just being on this barge ship, or the Titanic, as I would call it in this particular project.
And for people that don't know, the Titanic story didn't go too well.
It didn't go too well, yeah. Just watch the film. I think that, if I categorize it in that way, I find it more stressful to not be in control, at least have the ability to, alternate the journey that I'm on.
Is there potential for autonomy dysmorphia? Because I read the other day that I think it was 73% of men believe they could land a plane if the pilot was in trouble.
Is that true?
Apparently that's true.
There's a YouTube video out there to tell you how to do it.
Well, but can you get Wi-Fi on the plane? The pilot may have not switched it on. So I'm thinking, lots of people think they want autonomy, and they think they want to be a founder, they think they want to be a business owner. I'm not sure they do. When we kind of have a front seat to the doldrums of our life and the failings and the strain and stress, foibles of every moment, it seems difficult. And when we see other people, we're kind of getting their highlight reel. And a lot of people don't really see what happens behind the scenes. I don't want to say the hustle culture, but the grind, the hustle, the hard work. Do you think you've kind of put a rose-tinted lens on the autonomy, or do you genuinely think for most people it would be the same path as you, or is it a unique trait that founders have?
I think it's a unique trait for sure. I think I've helped startup scale before as part of a team, and bringing people in from that corporate world or from the world that's non-startup based or non-small business based. So it's definitely a sink or swim, and you find out pretty quickly whether people can deal with that autonomy. I mean, I used to famously ask in interviews that you have to be willing to get the milk, but also be willing to talk to the CEO about the strategy. And that could happen within 15 minutes of your day.
When they say get the milk, they mean from the shop? Or
yeah, from the shop.
Not from source, just to be clear.
So you got to be willing to do things that you might feel are beneath you, but then be willing to step up when required as well. And it doesn't matter who you are in a business. Like if we need milk, you got to go get it. And that's kind of, not saying that everyone's a flat hierarchy and that's how things should work, but you need to be willing to do things that are totally different and 100 different things, and just roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. And I think, having worked for 15 years in corporates and big on, I worked for IBM. There's 400,000 people there when I was there. those people, once they get out of that space where they're not kind of being told what to do and how to get to the next step, and here's the framework and here's how you get up the ladder, they like, it can terrify them. They're like, oh, what do I do now? And I'm not saying that leads to procrastination, but some people are more comfortable being told what to do, and that's okay. We need those workers in the workforce as well as the entrepreneurs and the innovators, right?
Obviously, we've gone through this period of time working in offices and work from home, and there's not really a debate I'm looking to get into, but the more I've kind of come back into office life and kind of been a part of it, the more I see this spillage, right? It's when I'm at home, I'm not unique in that I kind of go into monk mode, right? Everything is this maniacal focus, and I feel like I could be doing more. And when I come into the office, like someone will say, yeah, they're a hardworking bunch in so many offices I see. But someone goes to get a coffee and then they're talking about, oh, I went and got a coffee from this place, and have they still got the biscuits with the chocolate chips? And before you know it, 17 minutes have gone down the drain. You think, like, wow, like is this the same for every founder to kind of watch the spillage in their business and think, yeah, it's part of culture, it's fine? Or do you think more could be done?
Yeah, it's a real fine balance. I mean, is it any different to me doing the washing while I'm at home?
Listen, right. Some people, like, the monk mode doesn't allow for washing at home.
Okay.
So, I know
maybe I don't get into monk mode.
I know some people will be a lot more productive in an office, right? I've seen it.
100%, yeah.
Some people can really become isolated. But I think it's different for some people when they're running the business to kind of see how things operate.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, there's it's a whole debate about work from home versus, in the office, and that's playing out very obviously at the moment in the Australian ecosystem, with lots of two very clear sides, I think, as well. But yeah, I think, procrastination at home I believe is probably just as high as it may be in the office. My argument would be that maybe in an office that would help drive culture and relationships and therefore lead to productivity. I'm not saying that there's any proof that that's correct, but I don't think everyone gets into monk mode. I think that mindset is probably very heavily focused on like the leaders and the founders of a startup, or I would say technical resources as well. Like when they kind of get, many of them don't want to be in an office because they don't want to be distracted, because once they're kind of, zoned in, they need to be zoned in. But I think it's a personal thing, depends on your type. I personally can be distracted and jump straight back into what I was doing before, and then focus for an hour and do something quickly, and, postman's at the door, you need to sign for a parcel, and those distractions will happen naturally anyway.
I think, I'm not going to get into the debate either, but when I always think about social media, I think about Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and whatnot. I think about the comment section. But one thing I'd not really paid much attention to until now was LinkedIn. When I looked at the stats, I think of LinkedIn users, 10% are very active users, but only 1% are content creators on LinkedIn. And then 10% of those people or 9% are commenters that will interact, and 90% are lurkers. So I don't know how much attention to pay, because for engagement, any platform wants to exaggerate the kind of discourse between two parties. So whether anyone really cares, I'm not sure. But obviously, LinkedIn, social media, homepages are going to play out their kind of role. I guess they have the proverbial left versus right of office work. But one thing I've definitely found in running businesses is purpose. Whether I'm looking, I had a quote the other day, I think it's not the pursuit of happiness, it's the happiness in the pursuit. It's resonated really well with me. For you, when you set out to build this or anything, was it because you wanted to be, 8-figure man with all the money in the world, or was it because you found kind of purpose in what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be lying if I didn't believe there was an upside in the long term. Maybe not the 8-figure man, but yeah, I think purpose is really important. I mean, I think it's really hard to give what you need to give to make a business successful if you don't have that purpose. And that purpose doesn't, you need to be passionate about the problem that you're solving, particularly as a founder, or at least, everybody really that's in a startup should be passionate about the problem, because it's very incredibly important to the success. But yeah, I think
the founders of Atlassian are passionate about Jira.
Maybe not anymore. I don't know. I'm going to speak for them, but
We're not calling out Atlassian here either. So.
But there's a great business, and the name eludes me. But I saw her the CEO speak, and she spoke passionately about the business, but the actual purpose of the business was to actually help homelessness. So for every silk pillow that she sold, she was giving money back into the homeless community, and that was her purpose. And her business was, a way for her to meet her mission and purpose. And if you look at the Atlassian boys now, I think maybe that their purpose is much greater, but they saw the ability to build this platform that everybody in the world could use to enable them to do the things they're really passionate about, right? And that's somewhat how I think, I guess. Like, I'm actually super passionate about the problem that we're solving because I've felt the pain and believe the ecosystem is ripe for change. But then, if I can get an outcome that allows me to work more with startups, invest in startups, and, help that community in Australia, then, that's a really good outcome that I'd like to achieve as part of it. So it's kind of like really love the problem, passionate about the problem, have a outcome that I want to achieve that can allow me to do other things that I'm also passionate about.
I must admit, I definitely engage more with people that are passionate about the business they're running. Whether it's competence or mastery, there's something fascinating about that. So whether it's someone selling silk pillows to become a mission-oriented business for the homeless, or whether it's you in kind of talent tech, when someone has that level of mastery, that resonates more with me than, say, I'm not saying that the guys at Atlassian are effective altruists that are using money to kind of bring about the cause they want through the wealth they have. I can definitely get down more with people that are really passionate about what they're doing. Effective altruism would be another show all in itself.
It would. And, maybe those guys never intended to have that outcome, but it's just come to them anyway, and they're like, great, what can I do with this wealth and power that I now have to do something better? Maybe they never had that thought process from the beginning. Who knows? Right?
You know what? I saw Scott in the coffee shop the other day. I could have just asked him, but
maybe ask him next time.
I bottled it, so there we go. I'll never know.
I'm sure it's not the only time you buy.
No, I might see him again.
Just lurk in the coffee shop.
Yeah, that's if you see me lurking in the coffee shop, I'm just enjoying a coffee. What about the journey for you? Has it been a painful year or so? Has it been difficult?
Difficult in the way that everyone else has felt, right? It's been a challenging year for everyone in the workforce. Where we started, we were very kind of highly focused on, the early stage businesses and helping those companies because it's a good place to kind of test what we were doing. And obviously kind of the bottom fell out of that fairly early on this year in terms of funding and startups as, closed up. And those startups that were looking to raise were not looking to raise, and they were having to get rid of people. And there's been a few calls and even businesses that have gone out that maybe wouldn't have a year or so ago.
You kind of gave this reverse empathy to everyone in the workforce, and I think lots of people have felt that for sure. But when you're carrying a coffee cup down the stairs and you drop it on your foot, that's annoying. But when you're running a business and you're carrying a wardrobe down the stairs and it falls on you, that can kill you. So whilst I feel the pain of people in the workforce that have really struggled this year, I'm keen to get your interpretation of kind of what it's meant to you or to business owners.
Yeah, I think to business owners, particularly in our space, it's not as much of an impact because we can just follow the money, right? Where one industry is maybe suffering, another industry is growing. Unemployment rate hasn't dropped, right? So someone's hiring people, and you can kind of follow the industries that are being successful. Which is good, and we've been able to do that and follow. Maybe we've gone up tiers in terms of business sizes faster than we would have perhaps. But yeah, like some of these things can be the absolute death of businesses when you're set on a space, and maybe that's a good view as to why startups shouldn't focus on niches and be more like we've been highly focused on being fairly ecosystem driven. Fairly agnostic of industry because we understand that we'll need to pivot and change and move and support other industries along the way, rather than just focusing on trying to. Don't sell to startups because they don't have money, right? but have the ability to service those customers. But sometimes that means that, and probably the biggest impact for us this year is that we were kind of building our MVP and our alpha and that alpha is not suitable to sell to an enterprise, right? So we've had to kind of, move faster with the technology than we perhaps would have over that time, over that kind of shorter time period to serve those customers.
In terms of the idea, in terms of idea validation, market demand, taking it from MVP to money and concept to corporate, how do you go about testing the idea you have to think this can be a profitable business that will work?
Yeah, we originally came up with the idea sort of just before COVID. Spent some time sort of butcher papering in one of our founders' apartments, and thought that we did enough research to identify at least a gap or a space in the market, which is one, A, find a gap or find something you can be better at than somebody else. And then B, don't ask your friends, because everybody will tell you it's a great idea because they're not giving you money. So that kind of false validation can be a trap that you can fall into quite quickly.
Which can contradict with the friends and family round.
Yeah, the friends, family and fools. Yeah. Obviously at that point, maybe do ask them for money. But I think that, I'm a kind of a product guy. Like, there is no better way than talking to customers. But again, you can also fall into that kind of false validation trap as well, because, customers will say, yeah, of course, that's great, until you ask them to pay for it. So the only real validation you can ever get is when, and this is what many accelerator programs and other people will say, is like, go and find someone that will give you money for it. It doesn't matter what it is, just like, I'm going to give you the service, will you give me $1,000? And then just go from there. So I think that validation piece, you can get really caught up in a circle of like research and design and, trying to build something that's this big, when you could have built something, that's fairly small and compact that you can validate very quickly, because I don't know any startups that have not significantly pivoted away from where they first started from an idea perspective. So if you can get that pivot to find that product market fit as quickly as possible, then you're going to save time and money and energy in getting to that space.
Do you think it's easier to start the thing and then change course than it is to kind of sit and research and wait and iterate to the nth degree until you think what you've got is perfect?
Yeah, I always say, so I did a lot of kind of coaching and mentoring with founders at, Startmate and Giants and a few different spaces. And the thing I say to those guys that are in the ideation phase, like, they've got an idea, they haven't built anything yet, it's like, just write a pitch deck. Because a pitch deck is going to make you do a few things. It's going to make you do competitive analysis. So it's going to make you work out if someone's done what you're thinking about before. Or if they have, then how can you differentiate or have a moat? It's going to help you understand market size. So it's great if you can build something, but if the market size is like, $500,000, then there's no point. And then also make you think about, what's your USP going to be? What's the landscape like across the globe? You can answer all these questions that you can easily find through research and quick research to build a pitch deck. And then you'll kind of have an idea as to whether it's a thing that you want to put energy into.
Whenever I'm doing competitor analysis on anything I'm looking to build, the first thing I'll look at is who I'm up against rather than what I'm up against.
Yeah.
So I'll go and do a deep dive into that individual. We'll find as much as I can. Obviously, this is not like it's going to be super startup world. There's some. And if there's someone that's kind of come from a hyper-intellectual background that's been through a few startup failures, I know that I'm potentially in for a war, right? This person knows what it's like to go through the ringer. Whereas someone that's come from an easier background, lots and lots of success, I think, yeah, okay, you are not ready for what's about to hit you. When you're performing your competitor analysis, what are the things you look for in thinking, can we beat what we're up against?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because competitive analysis is always like such an important part of a pitch deck, and but then I've been to a lot of VC conversations recently where they've kind of said, don't worry about competitors. Like, if your market's big enough, then you can kind of ignore them a little bit. It's not important. It's not part of our investment decision. So like, my view, very maybe narrow-minded view, would be competition is good to look at to see what's out there and to understand if you can have a USP or a moat. But if your market's big enough, then it's big enough and you can exist, right? You don't need to have a duopoly in a market many markets anymore, right? It's not kind of Coke and Pepsi in the, or, apart from supermarkets, obviously, like Coles and Woolies. But there's not many duopolies that exist anymore. So if your market size is like our market size is like almost 18 billion in recruitment and talent spend in Australia, then if there's 100 other companies, you're still making a good coin, right?
I can't believe you missed out Virgin Cola from
you missed out Virgin Cola and Sprite or 7-Up. So yeah, it's more about what do you think you can attain. And that's why I think it's important to do a pitch deck early on as well, because you kind of think about your TAM, SAM, SOM, which is fundamentally made up numbers, right? Let's be clear. But at least it gets you think about, well, okay, if it's a $17 billion market, then you can backwards calculate, I could probably run a $50, $100 million revenue business. Then hang on, if I do a multiplier, it's a pretty valuable business. Do I need to take out my competition to achieve that or not? Or what am I disrupting? And that's where you need to think about it, and where you may come across a company that you're like, right, they're right in my space. I'm going to be up against them when it comes to pitches. And yeah, I'm like you. I'd go and look at who it is that's running that business. And
it seems like you do a very quick P&L mental arithmetic. Even then, if anyone wants to start a business and they're thinking, I'm not a mathematician, I can't necessarily reverse engineer the market, would you say don't come to the table until you've done that? Or is that just a skill set that some people need in a business to kind of run the maths on what your market can be?
Yeah, I would do it backwards. I would like and actually one of our advisors asked us this once very early on. He's like, what would you be happy with to leave the business? Like, what would it cost for you to leave the business, like happy and comfortable? And then you work out what that number is, and then you can work out, okay, so based on my shareholding in the business, you can, backwards calculate perhaps on some dilution or from investment, like what would it take for me to get that? That might be a $1 billion business, it might be a $50 million business, it might be whatever it might be, depending on how many founders you have and everything else. And then you can go, right, so how much do I need to drive from revenue for that business to get to that point? Using revenue as a simple driver for valuation, right? Obviously, if you're a deep tech company or something else, it could be different. But whatever multiplier you think would be for your business, and then work out, how do I get that chunk in the market?
What happens on the kind of materialistic, hedonistic horizon if you set a number on day one that you're happy to walk away with or from? What happens as that expands? Because let's say someone that goes to the gym, they might be happy with just getting in shape in the first 6 months, and before you know it, they're obsessed with the gym. They're working out 6 times a week. They're never going out anymore, and now they have an entirely different goal. So what happens if your goal moves forward, but the people that invest in you are expecting the guidelines and parameters they set from the early days?
What a great problem to have. I've got a 6-pack and now I want an 8-pack, right? I think, it's a great question, right? So if you can find yourself, and I think when we spoke before, I said, if I can find myself in a position where I can help hand the business over to adults to grow it, then that's a great position to be in. And if the business can get to a point where you have to make decisions like, what country can we go to next because we need to expand, or I need to get a CEO that's built $1 billion business before, or whatever it might be from a support perspective, or I need to get investment from these guys because this is going to help me go into the United States, whatever it might be, then you're in a really good position to make those decisions. Those goals can change, but it would be based on a good outcome and getting yourself to a place where you're actually able to make those kind of decisions.
Idea poaching. Is there a danger in when you go looking for validation that someone imitates or steals your whole business concept?
How many new ideas are there?
Thinking about, I heard the other day that they put a man on the moon before they put wheels on a suitcase. Right.
That's a good one.
So I'm guessing there's plenty of ideas that are staring me in the face. I could just probably type in ChatGPT and it'll tell me every idea that hasn't been thought of yet. But yes, there's plenty of ideas that possibly haven't been thought of.
Yeah. Well, you'd assume that have been thought of because ChatGPT is driven through human language and interaction, right? So presumably it's learnt it from somewhere. So it means let's take fintech. Like fintech's a really good example, and I kind of used this before. It's like fintech is not any new ideas, right? There's not a fintech in Australia that's introduced a new financial instrument, right? But they've introduced new experiences and ways to interact with those financial instruments to create markets and disrupt incumbents, right? So I think that's very similar, and there's obviously specific fields like, space and, cyber and cryptography and all these different deep tech spaces that are very much like these are new things we're inventing. But I think in the majority of, technology, SaaS businesses, B2C businesses, it's not really that many new ideas. It's just an iteration of something that's before, and everything is kind of infinitely copyable. The thing that I say to founders is, A, someone's got to have the idea. B, someone's got to execute it. And most people fail at B. So if you've started to build something, you're already ahead of 99.9% of people out there that won't even try. So you're already ahead. So just keep going, and everyone's going to be playing catch up.
Have you heard of the Zeigarnik effect?
No.
Zeigarnik effect is the concept that when you start something, you'll keep on doing it. You'll finish the thing. It's why a lot of writers might have a red wine to lower inhibitions to start the thing. Once they've started the writing, they'll be forced to continue. They did a study with waiters. So you go to a restaurant and you'll order your food. So you might say, I have the bangers of mash, but remove the peas or gravy on the side. They're not taking any notes. Right? With these waiters, when they checked, as the orders were going through, they would remember every small detail in this. But once the orders were closed, at the end of the night, they had no recollection of what any of these people did. It's the mind's need to close loops, and then you can move on. It's why people can't sleep at night when they need to wake up and write something down and say, I'll do that tomorrow. It closes the loop. It's why some romance novels on the back, not that I read them, say no cliffhanger guaranteed. So it almost sounds like, in a way, you're kind of creating this Zeigarnik loop in starting the thing that keeps you ahead of the crowd. At the very least, you've begun, so you'll finish. If you get enough success, you'll intimidate your competition into not even wanting to compete with you. So it sounds as though one of the most important things is simply starting the thing.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think, that'll get you ahead of most people that, A, not in a position to take a risk, or, B, won't take a risk. Maybe don't have the resources to do something. But, yeah, I think not everybody's of that mindset as well. So I think, if you can just start something and, like you say, keep going. There may be the kind of biggest concern would be that there's already an incumbent out there that can just copy your idea. But, incumbents are there to be disrupted, and their ability to be innovative, like the banks, for example, with fintechs, is that they're great targets for you to be bought at some point instead.
And you mentioned not everyone is in a position to take a risk. When you started this, were you in the perfect position to take on risk?
I don't think so, having 2 kids under 5. But I think... Yeah, I don't think there's ever a perfect time. But then if you look at the statistics for kind of founders, the majority of founders in Australia are mostly over 40. Like, the numbers are a lot higher than you'd expect, and what age is a lot higher than you may expect. Not everybody's straight out of university and, smashing out startups. That may be because most people get to a point in their career where they're kind of fed up and they want to do something different, or they've, created financial stability and they can therefore take a risk. But yeah, I think there's no real good time for it. You need to be willing to make sacrifices. And, that's a compromise of financial versus personal versus family and everything else. But, that's where finding that balance is super important, to make sure that you don't, let other things slip, even if you're having to, do something at 1 a.m. because you're the only person that can do it.
But 2 children under 5, in a very comfortable career. Obviously, there's upside, but it sounds like one of the worst times to take a risk in terms of family, expectations, things that are going to be going on in the peripheral of your life. Do you think you're someone that is just able and willing to take on risk more so than the next person?
Able and willing to take on stress, perhaps more than the average person. Through, I would say, kind of routinely, like, being stressed in careers and being used to it. It's not like a skill set that you're born with. It's something that you learn over time. But yeah, I think it's definitely a mindset thing as well. We talked about that kind of autonomy before, and some people just aren't willing to do what it takes. I think one of the biggest success factors that I've seen in founders is like just grit, like just they'll just do it. Like, I was asked to describe myself and what I was good at a founder session last week, and I was like, I just like get shit done. Like if I don't know it, I'll learn it to a degree that I can get away with it, or at least do something, complete it, and I'm willing to roll my sleeves up and, whatever it takes. So I think that kind of grit and determination is probably the most important factor, and in taking that risk and being willing to do what it takes to build something.
Do you read any Mark Manson?
No, I don't. No.
I'm going to pull out a quote from Mark Manson. The willingness to do tough things and be disliked is a superpower. You will inevitably develop the courage to do hard things that others won't do. This will then imbue your life with a sense of meaning and importance. It will also lead to success that others will be too intimidated to go after, but until you're willing to be disliked and do hard things, you'll be in a prison of other people's opinions. You'll never be free. Learn to be laughed at, hated on, and trolled. That's how you'll find success.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. I mean, I think particularly having been in leadership position before, not everyone's going to like you, and that's hard.
What do you reckon the ratio on the enjoyment of Adam Caines as a leader is?
I wouldn't want to hazard a guess at what that could be, but I'm in a small company, so the ratio is probably high. You'd hope, but you need to be willing to be disliked, and you need to be willing to laugh and step out the way, and also understand I guess what it takes to get yourself into that position. I think if we kind of mentioned it before, like just willingness to just do something and start is and having that grit and determination that you'll do what it takes to keep moving forward, whatever it is not everybody has that. I'm not saying that I'm perfect at it for sure. Like I'm not saying I have perfect balance either in everything, but just the ability to keep going and consume that at the same time is probably not everyone's cup of tea.
What stage are Upplft in at the moment? Are you bootstrapping it? Is it Series A?
So we're friends, family, and fools, and then have been
Triple F.
bootstrapping since then. Then now we're kind of like found our product market fit. Like now working with more partnerships and investment into building a bigger ecosystem, I guess, rather than looking down the traditional investment pathways.
And when, let's say, the inevitable success of finances hit and everyone comes in trying to invest, we've seen it before, the trappings of money, what they can do to a business. Yeah. What's your plan? Are you thinking, I'm going to go out and buy 16 sleep pods and a slide and fake grass for the office? Or are you a bit more reserved on what you're going to be doing with the cash?
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, the good thing about like my co-founders is that like they've been running a successful business for kind of 10, 12 years. So they have that that approach where it's like, profitability is like the core foundation for a business, which is great because, we know that means that we focus on what's required to get us to that point, without thinking about what investment impact could have. Whereas many other businesses where they've had investment are just like, right, let's just spend this to smash it out and get something to market with, and kind of missing the core principles of a business. And, that's partly the reason that we saw a lot of, people struggling this year in comparison to the previous couple of years, like that kind of growth at all costs. I think if we were to get investment, like ours would be very strategic. I think that it would be because they have an ability to open a network or open a geography or something similar, or they're a bigger ecosystem we could become a part of, like an Acqui. I don't think that from a founder perspective, we're very much into that sort of sleep pod, green AstroTurf, fake flowers, big neon sign on top of a building.
You get a neon sign on Alibaba for like $14.
Is that right?
Yeah. So we can stretch to the neon sign.
Okay, I can do that. I've seen that a few times when a few of those businesses are no longer in business, where they've got very nice offices for a very short period of time.
I see the wry smile on your face there, Adam.
Yeah, I'm not naming names. But yeah, I think it's easy to fall into that trap quite quickly. I think every coin spent should be helping you move forward. I think some of those things are potentially necessary for culture and having a team. And obviously, one of the main things that people spend money on is to employ people, and you have to provide certain things for those people, right? and that is a nice, a nice space to work, whether that's at home or in an office, and other things that come with that. But it's a balance versus, how much of that money is spent on pure growth, right?
Some people listening to this will be on that kind of pathway and journey, and they'll be thinking about investment. Do you think there's a cautious tale in investment? Because money is not free. There's always T's and C's that come with the P's. So for anyone that's kind of on that journey, do you think they should be very, very careful what money they take, how much, and who from?
Yeah, there's definitely good money versus bad money. And I've heard stories of both. Like, investors that ask for too much, have really stringent terms that, I know founders that have ended up selling their business and not making anything out of it after, spending 5-10 years in a business because they got bad deals. And, I've also heard of investors that are incredibly, deep into the business and more troublesome than they're worth as well. So I definitely, when I've spoken to founders about investment, is, you're interviewing those guys, those people, as much as, they're interviewing you. Because, and, VCs will say this, the investment's like a marriage, everyone's a 10-year success story, right? Not like a 2-year success story. So you're going to be with them for a while, and you're going to, they're going to be asking you questions along that way, and they're going to be demanding along that way because, they want to see a return on their investment. And there's so many different ways to get investment now in the ecosystem here. It's not just from VCs. It could be crowdfunding. We know when your investors are mum and dads and, Joe Blogs on the street. It could be from family offices or, high net worths, whatever it might be, or friends and family. So, you have an obligation to your business to make sure that the people that are involved and that are on your cap table can provide value. And I believe, you shouldn't take money for money. You should take money because these people that behind it are going to give you value. And they're aligned with your purpose and mission and values as well. And definitely, strategic fund. It's very easy to fall into the trap of taking money because you need it. And, I don't, not necessarily easy for everyone to pick and choose. I mean, if you think about the ecosystem of investment, let's take VCs. There's 200 people of those VCs that are there. Maybe 2 or 3 of them are aligned to the industry you're in, right? And then, there's maybe 2 or 3 partners or principals in that space that you have to try and persuade. So you could be looking at maybe 10 people in Australia that are useful for you, right? As a startup that can give you money. So the pool is not as big as people think when it comes to who's that person that's going to go to my board.
You're very good at reverse engineering everything, Adam. Yeah, I like this. It's you've almost kind of run the algorithm on everything that fits and aligns. I'm kind of keen to see where that goes in all paths. But yeah, you're building. I think when we spoke before, we talked about introverts, extroverts, ambiverts. For me, humans are very hit and miss, right? You've seen it in all walks of life. A director can even hire an actor that's amazing in one film, and then it flops, despite everything seeming great. And they've got the whole muscle of the machine behind them. How do you go about building a company and a team and a culture?
Yeah, it's hard. It's the experience that I've had, building teams, particularly in startups and scale-ups. There's a real tricky balance because there's a balance between I need people to grow, and am I willing to compromise on those kind of cultural aspects to get people in the door that maybe are not the right fit, but will help me move forward because I may lose, 3 months of, input and productivity trying to find that perfect fit. And that can have its upside and downside for sure. I think many of the experiences I've had is that most startups probably don't think about their culture and their values and things and their purpose up front. And we've run workshops with startups in this space, just to get them to think about it. And it's interesting to watch founders go through a process where what they think their purpose is and when they actually look to really write it down, not just what's on their website, it can change. And therefore, it makes them think about the types of people that they want and the types of culture they have and the types of values that they have. And values, we look to go beyond sort of, blanket keywords because everyone has the same 5 to 10 keywords. I think we actually narrowed it down to 20 words across 400 or 500 companies we researched, and they're all...
There we go, reverse engineering again.
We
picked out 19 key emotions, 20 key words.
That's right. And everyone says teamwork and collaboration and trust and innovation, but it's actually like the next 5 that are really interesting are the ones where you have to really think about it because everyone wants to achieve those.
What are the next 5?
Well, they could be all sorts of different things. Yeah.
Do you use anything like Myers-Briggs or the Big 5 or any kind of personality testing?
So we do, yeah. So we use it's like not a Big 5. It's an extension of the Big 5 called the Hexco framework, which adds an additional one, emotionality. And we do that as part of our application process. But we also, go through that with clients and say, think about the type of personality you want for this role, and then think about not your culture from a business perspective, because that's probably your values. Actually, think about culture from a team perspective and where they'll fit into that team culture. And there's different ways you can think about it. But yeah, I mean, to answer the question, like, there's no real secret sauce to it. 100%, if you're a founder and you're making your first hire and you're making your first 10 hires, you're probably going to go through those 10 people in the next 2 years, most likely. The majority of them. For you to get it right and hire 10, 15 people that are going to be with you for 10 years, there's probably examples out there, but I think they're thin on the ground.
How do you not get decision paralysis when you think about the success rate of the first 10 hires?
Yeah, it's really hard. Many founders have never hired before as well. I mean, that's an art form in itself, interviewing somebody. I mean, you seem to be doing all right at it.
I'm practicing every day.
You're practicing a lot. But it's hard. And that's where, there is a lot of help out there. And I'm not saying use us because we're not HR advisors. We're not teaching people to interview. But there's tools and techniques and things out there you can learn, and definitely people that can help. But again, it is hard because you could have suitable candidates. And it's like dating, right? And that's actually, our kind of hypothesis we started with on Butcher Paper was, why isn't hiring like dating? Because there's always a compromise. Like, nobody's perfect. There's never such thing as a perfect match, but there's a percentage of matching, and it's what are you willing to compromise? Like renting and like trying to find a rental property or a house, right? There's always a compromise, but maybe you don't want a toilet outside, and that's a compromise you're not willing to make. So you've got to think about the things that you're not willing to compromise on. Like, is that person only going to work remotely and never been in office? Are you willing to? Is that acceptable? Maybe for some roles it is, for some roles it isn't. Things like that.
It was interesting looking at the bell curve of kind of hires, because I'm not going to butcher the information that's kind of sitting in the back of my mind around the Big 5, but it was quite a stark correlation between the success rates of these when you're trying to pick people. But I do remember the Hexco.
Hexco, yeah.
Hexco, I think it was like a 0.32 success rate compared to Myers-Briggs, which was like a 0.14. So there was a strong correlation. They stress tested it against zodiac signs as well, which came out at 0% accuracy, which is
zodiac signs.
If you ever hire someone because they're a Scorpio and Aries, you could know that there was 0% correlation in that.
What zodiac sign are you?
Scorpio.
Scorpio.
What are you, Adam?
I'm a dinosaur.
What does that even mean?
Well, none of them are real, right?
So a dinosaur's not real either.
Yeah.
Wow, we got a conspiracy theory emerging.
Yeah. I don't think I'd be adding zodiac signs to the platform.
No, it's good to know. It's good to know. Or if someone really goes into depth, then you might know that you have a red flag emerging.
Yeah. No, it's definitely interesting. I think the way that we look at it is, you can do deep personality testing, but that's a friction point anyway. But some companies do require you to do that, particularly if you're in defence. You don't want to be, maybe you do want to be hiring sociopaths for particular roles, but not for everybody.
There's a need for all people have a need in the tribe, right?
Yeah.
Evolutionary psychology, evolution, all suggests that we've selected these people. There's a natural selection to certain individuals that are going to do well. I remember reading about the difference between tyrannical leaders and leaders of prestige. So the reason that Winston Churchill may have been a success for all his flaws during war, because he was a tyrannical leader.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Yeah, step up, right person, right time. But in times of peace, that's not necessarily going to work. Someone needs to come in, take the consensus, lead by prestige. And there's a big kind of argument about leaders in authority and leaders of an authority. Do you think your leadership stance, position, and who you are as a leader will change over the next 5 years?
Well, I hope I don't lean too much into the dictatorship style.
No, I mean we're not in times of war, at least.
Yeah. I think my leadership style has changed, over time as well. But adapting to the businesses you're in, right? Your leadership style is very different in a corporate where it's almost like, dictated to you as to how you should behave as a leader versus when you're building a team yourself and you're like, okay, how do I work out what type of people I want around me? And how do I help those people that are in a startup ecosystem, which is completely different to a corporate ecosystem where, I'm not as responsible for, the revenue of the business and paying those people on a monthly basis and everything else. So, you need to think about those types of things. But I think my style is more like, I guess, sort of trust and like providing people autonomy to fail as well as succeed and like helping people to learn. I don't know, does that need to change over time? Perhaps, maybe, like become a bit more authoritarianism, like over time.
What was that? Sorry?
But maybe become more like authoritative, I guess, over time. Maybe, but yeah, I think it very much depends on the type and style of business that you're involved in. Everyone has this idea of like this perfect place where everyone gets along and it's, everyone loves each other, and that's just not the reality of a business.
No, I think conflict is you need friction.
Yes,
you need friction, and there's been this huge debate around DEI in technology especially, and people have said diversity of geek doesn't mean diversity of thought. Sometimes you can have all this kind of kumbaya mentality. When you said it yourself, when you go to your friends and family fools with an idea, they can be fairly sycophantic in just creating an echo chamber of success.
Yeah.
So if you don't, I guess, have people that are comfortable with some conflict, some friction, then you're going to end up with this kind of you heard of the Abilene paradox?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. You're going to end up with this Abilene paradox, at least, or groupthink that's only going to halt the trajectory of the business.
Yeah, and that's the other trap that you can find yourself in any business is hiring yourself, and just you end up with a whole team of yourselves, and then you end up with the same idea. And diversity, I'm a big fan of diversity of thought and the best person for the job. And that's probably a whole other podcast for you as well, right?
Definitely.
In terms of that,
we can go deep with that.
We can go deep with that. Dangerous territory. But I think, trying to understand as a leader, like where your weaknesses are and trying to fill them as part of a team, I think is important as well. But also, having people that have the flexibility and capability and competency, like, and the right attitude, whatever form that might take in terms of how you assess that is like super important. I'm not a big fan of like everyone gets a Bellbean questionnaire and then I'm going to try and put you into this Myers-Briggs and you're a completed finisher or you're a researcher or you're an analyst and I'm going to build this circle of amazing people and that's a perfect team. I don't think that really works.
You heard of Daniel Kahneman?
Yes.
Yeah, the perfect example, right? Come out of university, 21 years old, and then designed, I think, personality tests for the Israeli army. They did find a level of success in what they were pigeonholing people, but they essentially worked in all different roles, and it gave them characteristics and traits of success. But Daniel Kahneman, interesting guy. We've not known each other for a long time, but you seem on balance, like a happy person. You're going to be coming up facing stress in any work environment, but especially where we are right now. How do you kind of balance everything and ensure your happiness or at least contentment for tomorrow?
Well, everyone's like a swan, right? You're elegant on the above the water and then kicking underneath to stay afloat.
I always thought that was a duck, but yeah, swan. I guess swans are much more graceful than ducks.
Swans are much more
makes
graceful.
Sense.
Yeah, and well protected in England as well.
I actually was playing golf with someone once, and they hit. I'm not even going to tell the story. I'm still.
Well, you can cut this bit out.
No, I'm still suffering significant trauma from seeing what that drive did.
There's no. Again, I think like you said earlier, like everybody's different, and you need to find the outlay for whatever it may be from a mental health perspective, right? And I'm definitely not perfect at it, but there's things that I do, like whether it's going for a swim or going for a walk or listening to a podcast, an audio book, or whatever it may be, just, even just like get in the bus, because that's 30 minutes a day where like I'm on my own It's like just those small things that kind of help you reset and help you maybe think about things, and maybe the whole kind of shower thought, idea is that, you'll think of something or maybe solve a problem that's been bothering you when you're not focused on it as well. So I think if you can find that headspace, that's probably like the most super important thing you can do. That probably works for me. Mental health is like a whole other thing, right? Everyone's different, thinks different, can cope with certain levels of stress and whatever it may be. So you got to find out what works for you.
Have you heard of the concept of the 24-hour you?
The 24-hour you, no.
So the premise is that what would you tomorrow want the today version of you to do?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've had similar principles, like, looking at would the person in 20 years be annoyed at you for not helping you progress or solving that problem, whatever it may be.
Yeah, 20 years. Yeah, I think that's a whole other conversation. But I think whenever I'm faced with a decision, at least a stressful decision, or even just some pursuit that I think is risky in the moment, I try and remove myself from it just momentarily and think, all right, George, if you woke up tomorrow and you could speak to you today, what would you be saying to yourself? Like, don't have that cocktail, don't go on that night out, don't hire that person, you see the red flags. Do you make kind of in the moment decisions, or do you like to take time to ruminate and consider?
Yeah, I think I like to think of myself as impulsive, but I'm probably not. Like, if I'm in a room of like 20 people, I'm often not the loudest person there, and I'm like a reflector, so I'll kind of sit and listen and then jump in when I feel it's appropriate or there's something for me to give, and I feel like my brain works in that way. So whilst I might feel like I'm impulsive, I've actually probably done the kind of calculations or the thought process in the back of my head as well to work out whether it's a good decision or not at that time. Maybe that's a version of kind of stepping out, and I haven't thought about it from a what would Adam say tomorrow to that decision.
This is a new thing you can bring in for a week. We'll do an A/B split test on this one.
I think I'm probably more a logical person in terms of like calculative in terms of decision making versus emotive, or at least I'd like to think I am anyway. So that's maybe the way I think of it. But no, I will definitely ask myself that one next time I want a cocktail.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's great advice when you have the second cocktail at least, because one's not enough and two's too many.
That's right. Yes. I think someone described an espresso martini last week as something that will keep you up and put you to sleep at the same time, and it was the perfect description.
Yeah, I'm going to be coining that. That will be in the comment section, and that's something I like to kind of round out on to end the show. Kind of understanding. We've talked about part of your past, in the present. What do you see the kind of future holding for you? Yeah,
who knows? I mean, obviously,
you probably know.
Probably.
If anyone knows, it's you.
Yeah, maybe. I really passionate about our business and the problem space, and I do believe that we can achieve success. I think there's a really good opportunity for us to get a good exit on the business at the right time, whether that's through some sort of partnership with something that's bigger, or whether that's through handing it over to some adults at the right time that can take it to whatever level it might be. And I think that my ultimate goal would be to not necessarily just keep going and doing the next thing, but I really want to be able to kind of embed a bit more into the startup ecosystem and really kind of help founders and support founders, and more on the kind of advisory space and early stage space. I still think there's a lot of help and support needed for that part of the ecosystem, and if that's something that I can do through having a success story myself, then that would be great.
I can't believe we've made it through the whole hour without once slating James Corden.
I know.
James, if you're listening, we're not your biggest fan.
We did, yeah. Good for us.
Good for us. And Adam, actually, I've been enjoying a lot of your writing on LinkedIn. It's quite provocative. I think people should check it out. But if people want to see more of you and what you do, where can they find you? Not literally, of course. Don't give your address out. But where can people see more of Adam Caines?
Yeah, so LinkedIn. Please feel free to follow me and follow my provocative content that hasn't managed to work out how the LinkedIn algorithm works yet.
What's Alex Hormozy saying? You don't need to work out the algorithm. You just need to get better.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Although, have you tried uploading pictures of a puppy?
Maybe I should. I mean, I did see somebody posted their honeymoon pictures on there the other day. I was like, what is happening to this place?
Yes. Puppies, kittens. I can't live without coffee. So it's all in there. Yeah, it's all in there. I love the echo chamber of LinkedIn. It's become...
It really is. And then, typically kicking around the startup hub. So if anybody's around there, I'm happy to meet for coffees and chat to founders and, give help and experience, open my network where I can. So I think I'm a big fan of abundance culture, the kind of all ships rise, and I think there's a lot more that we can do as startups to work together.
Yeah, we started the show with the Titanic, and we've ended it with all ships rise. This is the perfect
There's a
closing
thematic
point
to the conversation.
Adam, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate you.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.